Damn it. I got too greedy. That last 2 million must have been the tipping point. I should have left it alone. I had a bad feeling about that account, and now I know why. They're on to me. But they still believe I'm clueless, which works to my advantage. I've got just enough time to disappear for good, leaving them with nothing but dead ends. Good thing I always had a backup plan. But who am I, really? And who the hell is after me? My current identity doesn't matter. In less than 2 hours, it'll be wiped clean. The fools chasing me will be running in circles, hitting brick walls long before they gather enough intel to track me down. Soon enough, I'll become what I truly am, a hacker. A damn good one, and a furious one, with a short list of targets. I don't just expose criminals, I hunt them. My specialty? Cartels and their dirty money. I keep a close eye on their financial networks, siphoning off their blood-stained profits and tipping off authorities with just enough evidence to spark a storm. Personally, I've taken down 4 corrupt politicians, over 50 dirty cops, a handful of military officers, and a long list of traitors. In total, I've drained over $100 million from these bastards, kept a little for myself, of course, but sent about 80% to charities helping victims of organized crime. My personal revenge fund, put to good use. Why, you ask? It all comes back to my little sister. She got tangled up with the wrong guy. I warned her, begged her, but she wouldn't listen. After our parents died, I did everything I could to keep her safe, but she made her own choices. Then came the worst 2 years of my life, the ones I spent rotting in solitary grief after identifying what was left of her body. That grief transformed me. Before, I was just a guy with a knack for computers. After, I became something else entirely. Something lethal. I buried myself in our parents' old basement, peeling back the layers of the digital underworld. I tore into encrypted files, slipped through so-called impenetrable firewalls, and unearthed the truth about those responsible. Eventually, my findings landed on the DEA's desk. The gang that tortured and butchered my sister was trying to cut deals with law enforcement, handing over information on rival groups to save their own skin. The feds got lazy. Rival gangs acted first. In the end, the government didn't have to lift a finger. The streets handled justice. But I wasn't satisfied. Now, I'm the one being hunted. The cartel wants me dead. Can't say I blame them, considering I drained $30 million from their accounts. I should have stopped at $28 million, but there was this one last account. Something about it felt off. I knew it was a trap, but I was young, reckless, and still burning with rage. They set up a trace program on that account, tracking the breach to its source. I saw the warning signs too late. By then, my anti-hacking system was screaming at me. I scrambled to sever the connection, bouncing my digital footprint across 100 different IP addresses before routing it through layers of bypass servers. I plugged in my flash drive, executed the kill switch, and wiped the trail clean. All evidence? Gone. The vacant building I'd been using as my base conveniently burned to the ground. Some poor homeless guy's fire got out of control, a tragic accident, at least according to the official reports. The reality? Every single hard drive, memory card, and personal document I ever owned was turned to ash. With nothing left to tie me down, I jumped in my van and drove west. For days later, I rolled into Las Vegas and started over. "Sweetheart, can you take a look at this?" I called out, keeping my voice light. The computer's acting up again. My wonderful wife, Rebecca, walked over, shaking her head in exasperation. "Honestly, Ethan, how does a 25-year-old man know so little about computers?" she teased, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead before taking over. A few keystrokes later, she had it working again. If only she knew. "Dinner's in 30 minutes. Don't get lost in that screen." "Thanks, dear," I said, watching her disappear into the kitchen. It's been 2 years since we got married, and I still can't believe I pulled this off. After leaving my old life behind, I reinvented myself as a simple trucker working at a local lumber mill. The pay was decent, thanks to our union, but I wasn't exactly scraping by. I had hundreds of thousands stashed away in offshore accounts, and I slowly withdrew just enough to stay comfortable. With that, I bought a cozy 3-bedroom house sitting on an acre of land. A quiet life, just the way I wanted it. I also built something extra, a hidden structure right next to the house. Outwardly, just a workshop. But beneath the unassuming concrete floor was my real sanctuary. A concealed stairway led underground, where I slowly rebuilt my digital arsenal. I wasn't actively going after cartels anymore, at least not for now. I had enough funds to keep my head down, but I still needed to stay sharp. Technology evolved fast, and I wasn't about to fall behind. So, I kept my skills honed in secret. The workshop served a dual purpose. It was where I restored classic muscle cars, a convenient excuse to keep Rebecca out. She couldn't care less about my hobby, so she never set foot in there. Perfect. You might be wondering, why keep my past hidden from my wife? Simple. She knows me as Ethan, the trucker, a man who can barely operate a computer. Not Ghost, the hacker with a bounty on his head. When we first met, I couldn't exactly come clean about my past, could I? The feds wanted me under their thumb, and criminals wanted me in the ground. If either side ever found me, it would end badly. After we got married, I took even more precautions. For her sake, the less she knew, the safer she was. If she had no idea about my past, there was nothing for anyone to exploit. No leverage. No loose ends. It's better this way. She only needs to know the man she married. Now, let me tell you a little something about my wife. First off, she's absolutely beautiful. At least, that's what I thought before the illusion started to crack. I've always found it amusing how every man in every story seems convinced that his woman is the most beautiful in the world. Beauty is subjective. To some, she might be nothing special, just another woman in the crowd. But to me, she was everything. Rebecca stood at 5 feet 6 inches, with wavy, copper bronze hair cascading down to the middle of her back. Her emerald green eyes had a way of drawing you in, making you forget everything else. She had a slender waist, a toned, flat stomach, slightly wider hips, and an undeniably tempting backside that measured a perfect 40 inches. Her long, sun-kissed legs were toned and smooth, a testament to someone who knew how to take care of herself. She had a delicate nose, high cheekbones, dimples when she smiled. If she actually smiled, that is, full, kissable lips, and a modestly defined chin. So, how did we meet? Fate, coincidence, or just dumb luck? I was working my shift at the sawmill when she walked in, looking a little lost. She was in need of some wooden boards for shelving in her new apartment. While we browsed the options, she admitted she had zero experience with tools. Perfect opportunity. I casually offered to drop by after work and set them up for her. My only condition? She'd cover the beer and buy me dinner the next evening. That first dinner turned into a night of dancing. Sorry to disappoint, but there's no scandalous one-night stand here. The night ended with a simple, chaste kiss on the cheek. Truth be told, I was a little hesitant when it came to women. Let me explain. Back when I stole millions from the cartel, I was 19, scrawny, and clueless. At 110 pounds, I was nothing but a computer geek with zero experience in the dating world. My interactions with women up to that point? Non-existent. Moving to Las Vegas changed a few things. I'd had exactly 3 encounters with escorts, each more enlightening than the last. The first was dull. She might as well have been a robot. The second, at a brothel in Pahrump, at least pretended to care. The third? Well, she was different. I paid for the whole night, and in return, she gave me a real education. By the time I found myself in an actual relationship with Rebecca, I was no longer clueless. It wasn't until our 5th date that things finally progressed. I took her to dinner at the Stratosphere, followed by a night of drinking and dancing on the Strip. A little wine, a lot of movement, and 2 hours later, we ended up back at my place. I had thought she was beautiful before, but seeing her without clothes, she was breathtaking. I didn't even have to ask if she was satisfied. Her damp sheets said it all. Apparently, my last instructor had taught me well. By then, I wasn't the same scrawny hacker I once was. A full year of sports and manual labor had transformed my frame. At 6 feet 1 inch, I carried more muscle, more endurance, and more confidence than ever before. I never thought much about my own size, just assumed I was average, like every other guy. Of course, the escorts had showered me with praise, but I figured that was part of the job. Rebecca, however, seemed genuinely surprised. 6 months into dating, I popped the question. 6 months after that, we were married. Simple as that. On paper, everything was perfect. We had a comfortable life. Rebecca worked as an accountant for a large national firm, bringing in a solid paycheck. Between her salary and mine, we were set. I never had to dip into my hidden fortune. We ate at high-end restaurants, enjoyed Vegas shows, took the pontoon boat out on the lake, and drove nice cars. Our bedroom life? More than active. In the beginning, we averaged 4 times a week, often spilling out of the bedroom, the backyard, the pool, the hot tub. Variety was key. During the day, I kept my routine. After work, I spent a couple of hours tinkering in my shop, sometimes working on classic cars, other times on my computer. Was I up to anything illegal? Technically? No. I didn't steal. I didn't alter anything. I just hacked into places I shouldn't be, just to keep my skills sharp. I had the capability to drain accounts, crash networks, ruin lives. But I didn't. I didn't want to leave a trace. After dinner, Rebecca and I would curl up on the couch, watch a movie, then head to bed. Sometimes, that included a couple of hours of extracurricular activity before sleep. And through it all, I played my role to perfection. The clueless husband. The guy who couldn't even check his email without help. Who would ever suspect that beneath that act was one of the most wanted hackers in the world? Because while Rebecca slept peacefully beside me, I was deep inside the systems of banks, governments, and corporations, running my hacks through a maze of foreign servers. My personal network of bot-controlled computers still existed, though heavily disguised. Then, about 6 months ago, things changed. Rebecca started acting different. At first, it was subtle. She was tenser, distant. Our intimacy dropped from 4 nights a week to 2. She was exhausted all the time. She worked late more often, and when she came home, she barely had the energy to eat before heading straight to bed. When I asked, she gave me a reasonable explanation. A massive bill they were dealing with at the office. Sounded legit enough. She also started going out more. Fridays after work, happy hour with her coworkers. She'd call me from the office, tell me she'd be late, and I never thought much of it. Until 6 months passed. I asked how long this big financial problem was going to last. She gave me a nonchalant answer. Just a couple more weeks. I've been working my ass off, Ethan. I deserve a little fun. Sure. Sounded reasonable. Except something felt off. And if there's one thing I've learned, when something feels off, it usually is. I decided to surprise Rebecca with a full-day spa package that Saturday. When I handed it to her on Wednesday night, she was over the moon, showering me with gratitude. That gratitude quickly turned into passion, and we spent the night making the most of each other. Saturday morning, she was out the door by 9 a.m., blowing me a quick kiss before heading off for a day of pampering. She wouldn't return until 4 p.m. I made myself a strong coffee and walked to my workshop, ready to finish up an engine I had on the bench. An hour into my work, I decided to take a break and head into my computer room. Up until that moment, I had strictly avoided hacking into Rebecca's company. It was a rule I lived by. Don't foul your own nest. I never interfered with my own workplace, and I sure as hell wasn't going to mess with hers. But now I wasn't so sure. I started thinking about that big account she'd been talking about. Something about it felt off. Maybe it was worth looking into. Maybe I should dig a little deeper. Their security was laughable. I was inside within minutes. First stop? Rebecca's work computer. Since she was deep into that project, I figured I could find some insight there. But something wasn't adding up. The files on this huge client seemed unremarkable. No major discrepancies. No obvious red flags. Then I stumbled upon something unexpected. A locked folder titled Photos for Derek. Derek. That spineless little weasel. I knew exactly who he was. I'd met him at several company events. Rebecca always spoke highly of him, praising his so-called computer skills. I wasn't impressed. It took me seconds to crack the folder. What I found inside? A nuclear bomb to my marriage. Dozens of explicit photos of Rebecca. In her office. In a motel room. In another man's bed. And the worst part? Some of the things she was doing in those pictures? She had always refused to do with me. I stared at the screen, my mind blank, my stomach churning with rage and disgust. Something inside me, some fundamental piece of who I was, shattered. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Eventually, I snapped out of it. Confronting her was inevitable. Divorce was non-negotiable. But before I made my move, I needed more information. I needed to know how long this had been going on. I dug deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. According to her emails, this wasn't some recent affair. Rebecca had been involved with this man for over a year before she even met me. So why the hell did she start a relationship with me? What was her real game? Then came another discovery. Emails about accounting discrepancies. Conversations about large clients, offshore accounts, and shady transactions. I shifted to Derek's computer. More photos. More evidence of her lies, her deception, her complete and utter betrayal. I needed more time to piece this together. So I made copies. Every file, every email, every message. They all went onto a spare drive on my server. Then, out of habit, I checked the company's personnel folder and froze. My name was on one of the files. Before logging out, I took one final step. I installed spyware on both Rebecca and Derek's computers, as well as the company server. From now on, everything they did would be redirected to me. Cars could wait. Vengeance couldn't. Rebecca came home from her spa day glowing with relaxation and gratitude. That night, she thanked me in the most physical way possible. And yes, I let her. Despite everything I knew. Despite every fiber of my being screaming at me to throw her out. I let it happen. Why? Because I'm human. Because Rebecca knew exactly how to distract me. Because, despite everything, her body, her enthusiasm, her sheer energy were impossible to resist. And because in my eyes, she was the devil incarnate. Sunday morning, she was still asleep when I returned to my shop. I had work to do. First, I accessed her phone and installed spyware. From now on, every text she sent would be copied to my system. Every call she made, digitally recorded. Every website she visited, logged. Then she left at 10 a.m., claiming she was meeting a friend for shopping. She had disabled the Find My Friends app on her phone. Red flag. So I took a different route. I hacked into her car's GPS. And to my surprise, she actually did go to the mall. Good. That gave me time to dig further. With Rebecca out, I took her laptop and began my deep dive. Step 1. Copy the entire hard drive. Step 2. Install a keylogger to track everything she typed. Step 3. Activate the webcam for remote access. While waiting for the files to copy, I skimmed through her browser history. And that's when I found it. A second email address. And frequent visits to a Cayman Islands bank. That was going to require a lot more investigation. I had just enough time to clean up before Rebecca came home. I wiped some grease on my hands and face, making it look like I'd been working on my car all morning. She walked in. Same routine. Shower. Dinner. Movie. Bed. And for a week, I played the part of the devoted, oblivious husband. Each evening, I'd head to my shop, pretending to tinker with an engine or a transmission. In reality, I was drowning in the data I had stolen from her life. And then, on Tuesday evening, I found something that made my pulse spike. A message from Derek. A warning. Make sure you delete the browsing history on Ethan's laptop after you use it. What the hell was Rebecca doing on my computer? Why the hell did she need my laptop? I had configured it to connect securely to my remote servers from the moment I bought it. But the thought of someone else using it against me? That had never even crossed my mind. The following evening, as I was sifting through updates from Rebecca and Derek's work computers, something caught my eye. A new data stream. From my personal laptop. Instantly, I dropped everything else and focused in. As I analyzed the incoming feed, things got worse by the second. Money was being moved. A lot of it. I activated my laptop's camera and redirected the feed to a secondary monitor. And there she was. Rebecca, sitting at my desk, using my computer. A Bluetooth earpiece in place, deep in conversation. I patched into the call. Her voice came through crystal clear. Under Derek's instructions, she was transferring $50,000 from a fake company account to a Cayman Islands bank. Using my laptop. My IP address. Once she was done, she methodically wiped the browsing history and logged out. She was too good at this. Too comfortable. And I knew, in that moment, this wasn't the first time. I hadn't checked the HR file under my name yet, the one I found buried in their company system. So, I did. And the hits kept coming. I had been hired as a computer security consultant. Of course, I had never been informed of this. Derek, as head of IT, had the authority to approve hires. That meant he had been signing off on payments under my name, transferring them directly into their offshore account. This wasn't just fraud. This was theft on a massive scale. And I was their fall guy. It wasn't just an affair. Rebecca wasn't just cheating. She had been planning this from the very start. I dug deeper, and what I found, pure betrayal. I went through Rebecca's old emails, back to the beginning of our relationship, and there it was, clear as day. I had been handpicked. Rebecca had deliberately targeted me for this. In one of her earliest emails to Derek, she had evaluated me like a damn job applicant. He's attractive, so it won't be hard to keep him happy. But I'm not sure if this will work long-term. He doesn't seem very tech-savvy. Derek had reassured her. That's a good thing. The less he knows, the easier this will be. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just an affair. This was entrapment. And now? Now it was my turn to play. I started laying the groundwork for my revenge. Step 1. I opened new bank accounts under fake identities. Step 2. I activated my bot army. Most of them were decoys, creating digital noise. But a select few were carefully planted to leave a trace. I wanted them to think they were onto something, to chase a false lead. Step 3. I erased my personnel file from their company servers. Completely. Gone. Step 4. I altered every money transfer log associated with my laptop, rerouting all digital evidence to a fake IP address. I was removing myself from the crime scene. Step 5. I unleashed a virus on my laptop. A powerful, irreversible virus. It wiped everything. Then I disconnected it from my hidden servers. By the time I was done, my digital fingerprints were nowhere to be found. That night, I played my final bluff. I casually opened a spam email in front of Rebecca. A few clicks later, I let out a dramatic groan. Damn it! My laptop's acting up. Within an hour, the virus destroyed my laptop completely. Rebecca was right there, watching the whole thing. She did a poor job hiding her relief. I could almost see the calculations running through her head. The laptop was gone. The evidence was gone. Or so she thought. The next morning, I intercepted another conversation between Rebecca and Derek. They were so damn close to finishing their scheme. They just needed 2 more transfers, another $10 million, before they could spring their trap. And then, Rebecca would be the one to discover the missing money. She would lead the investigation. Derek, as head of IT, would oversee the cybersecurity aspect, and all the evidence would point directly to me. Then, she'd file for divorce. I'd be arrested, and while I rotted in prison, she and Derek would wait just long enough before getting married. They even laughed about how I'd sit in an interrogation room, clueless, while detectives grilled me about millions of stolen dollars I knew nothing about. And then, Rebecca made her final move. She offered to buy me a new laptop. Why? Because they still needed my digital trail for those last 2 transfers. They were running out of time. The final phase of their plan was just 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. That was all the time I had left. Monday morning, I made my first real move. I went to my boss and told him I needed a week off. He didn't hesitate. I had plenty of vacation time saved up. Now, I had 7 full days to turn the tables. Rebecca thought she had the perfect setup. Derek thought he was untouchable. They thought I was clueless. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the morning scouring the internet for the most ruthless divorce attorney in town. Someone who wouldn't just win, but would completely obliterate Rebecca in court. By the afternoon, I had an appointment set for the next day. They thought they had 3 weeks. They'd be lucky to make it to 2. When I got home, I powered up my computer and got to work. My first order of business was Derek. For an IT expert, you'd think he'd have the common sense to power down his home computer when it wasn't in use. But no, the idiot just turned off the monitor. Sloppy. It took me minutes to route his system through a server in Belarus. If anyone tried tracing it, they'd find themselves running into a digital black hole. The cartel I infiltrated 5 years ago had at least taught me a thing or two about security. Even though Derek and Rebecca regularly updated their passwords, they still used the same banks, a rookie mistake. Passwords don't mean anything when you store them on a personal computer riddled with phishing vulnerabilities. That was step one. Derek would get what was coming to him. But first, I needed him to stay alive long enough to take Rebecca down with him. As usual, I headed to my shop to tinker with my car. Meanwhile, Rebecca rushed off to Walmart to buy me a new laptop. Perfect. With her out of the house, I laid the groundwork. It was crucial that she was home when certain things happened. If she had a concrete alibi, she could weasel her way out of it. I wouldn't let that happen. When she got back, she messaged me, saying she had bought the laptop and it would take her about an hour to set up. I played along, thanking her, then got to work. The first step was severing Derek from Rebecca's digital life. For all the hatred I had for Rebecca, I wasn't going to let her die over this. Derek? He wasn't going to be so lucky. He'd either end up rotting in a cell or meeting a much bloodier end. Rebecca? She was going to prison. For how long? Who knew? I established a new connection between Rebecca's laptop and her company's servers. Then, I funneled $20 million from the company into 4 separate accounts, all registered under her name. Just like that, she became the official embezzler. After that, I booked a one-way ticket for her to the Cayman Islands. Thursday morning departure. It needed to look like she was making a run for it. Before she finished setting up her brand new laptop, I purged every trace of Derek from her contacts, emails, and work systems. Then, I erased all the spyware from her devices, leaving no trace of my involvement. As a final move, I cut her connection to my network completely. Then, I remotely disabled the wireless router in the house. I had a separate, hidden router in my shop, one she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, I got a message from the spyware on her phone. She had finished setting up my laptop and was just about to make another transfer when the internet mysteriously cut out. I couldn't help but laugh. I could picture her panicking, scrambling to figure out what went wrong. While she was distracted, I moved all the stolen money into new accounts under her name. Once the accounts were drained, I closed them immediately. As the final touch, I removed the spyware from her phone to prevent any further detection. With everything set in motion, I went out for dinner. Tomorrow was going to be one hell of a day. Rebecca was visibly anxious. When I walked in, she immediately told me that my new laptop was ready, but there was one problem. The internet was down. Oh, what a shame. Of course, I played along. Damn, that's inconvenient. She nodded, clearly frustrated, but didn't push further. Throughout the evening, she was glued to her phone, texting someone nonstop. I already knew who. I didn't have to see the messages to know she was panicking. She couldn't access the accounts, couldn't move the money, couldn't fix what I had just destroyed. She kept glancing at me, waiting for me to do something about the internet. I didn't. Instead, I sat back, enjoyed the movie, and watched her frustration grow. By the time I went to bed, there was no intimacy that night. I had no interest in playing along anymore. She didn't say anything about it. She was too preoccupied. Good. The next morning, I left the house before Rebecca even got up. I had an appointment with my lawyer, and I couldn't help but wonder, how was Rebecca's day going to unfold? Soon enough, I'd have my answers. When I was ushered into my lawyer's office, I almost laughed at the sheer perfection of it. You know those TV dramas where the attorney is both dangerously intelligent and distractingly attractive? That was my lawyer. 5 feet 6 inches, a face like an angel, curves that could make a man wreck his car, and legs that seemed to stretch for miles. And the moment she started speaking, I knew Rebecca was in serious trouble. Her presence alone radiated control. This wasn't just a lawyer. This was a weapon, and I was about to unleash her on Rebecca. I made sure she understood everything. First, I told her about Rebecca's infidelity. Then, I revealed the embezzlement and the setup. When she asked how I knew all this, I fed her a carefully curated story. I was using my wife's laptop because mine was malfunctioning. That's when I stumbled upon a folder filled with explicit photos, and then found her incriminating emails. It laid out everything, the affair, the theft, the entire scheme. I told her that I just wanted out before everything imploded. She nodded, understanding exactly what needed to be done. She said she could serve Rebecca by the end of the week, but I held up a hand. Not yet. Not until I was completely finished. Rebecca thought she was playing chess. She had no idea she was already checkmated. I had a sudden stroke of inspiration and decided not to tip my hand too soon. With that, we wrapped up the meeting, and I headed home. I powered up my system, reactivated the home Wi-Fi, and got down to business. I left spyware running on Rebecca's work computer, and sure enough, things started unraveling fast. By the next morning, chaos had erupted. The missing $20 million had been discovered, triggering an immediate emergency meeting at her office. While they scrambled for answers, I managed to breach Derek's phone. He was already panicking. He had traced the theft back to Rebecca and was now realizing that their shared offshore account had been completely drained. Every last cent had been rerouted into new accounts under Rebecca's name. Accusations flew, but neither of them could come up with a plausible explanation. That was when Rebecca received an email summoning her to a meeting with the CEO, CFO, and head of security. I could only imagine her reaction. A few hours later, the sound of multiple vehicles pulling into my driveway interrupted my fun. I quickly secured my shop, making sure the hidden entrance to my underground room was locked. No need for anyone poking around in there. To keep up appearances, I grabbed some grease and smeared it on my arms, making it look like I'd been elbow-deep in a car engine. When I stepped out, I immediately spotted several police cruisers and a fleet of black Chevrolet Suburbans. The officers wore standard uniforms, but the guys climbing out of the SUVs had FBI written all over their windbreakers. This was getting interesting. I barely glanced at the warrants before inviting them inside, playing the cooperative husband with nothing to hide. I led them straight to Rebecca's computer and casually mentioned my new laptop, still barely touched since she had just set it up the night before. The Wi-Fi had been down, so I hadn't even logged in yet. "Take whatever you need," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not exactly great with computers anyway." Several hours of questioning at the police station followed, but I stuck to my role. I was just a simple truck driver, clueless about Rebecca's accounting job, her clients, and any financial dealings. I feigned shock when they asked about a one-way plane ticket to the Cayman Islands. Poor Derek. Forced to testify against Rebecca, he must have felt his world collapse when he realized she had cut him out entirely, stolen all the money for herself, and was about to leave him holding the bag. Despite the intensity of the investigation, they eventually let me go. My shop had been searched from top to bottom, but they never found the hidden entrance to my underground server room. Rebecca wasn't so lucky. She was arrested while I was still being interrogated. Derek must have been crushed watching her get hauled away. He had truly believed she was his partner, his ride or die. Now he was left with nothing but the ruins of their plan. Naturally, Rebecca used her one phone call on me. Ever the devoted husband, I immediately secured a lawyer for her. Of course, I had done my research beforehand, making sure to find one of the most incompetent defense attorneys available. Someone who would botch the case just enough to guarantee her conviction. The beauty of a federal case like this? There's no parole, no early release. If she was sentenced to 20 years, she would serve every last day of it. I attended her bail hearing, even using our house as collateral to get her out. She was deemed a flight risk and slapped with an ankle monitor. I played the part of the worried husband, pretending to be devastated. Fortunately, her own stress spared me from any marital obligations. Her phone had been seized as evidence, but I quickly replaced it with a new one, complete with fresh spyware. It didn't take long for the real fun to begin. Derek had blocked her. She tried reaching out, but he refused to respond. He knew he'd have to testify against her, and there was no salvaging what they had. Still, she stubbornly refused to take a plea deal, convinced someone had set her up. It was almost amusing watching her try to piece it together. She knew she had transferred half the money, but swore she hadn't touched the rest. She knew she never bought that plane ticket. She knew she never cut Derek out of the account. She just couldn't figure out who had. The trial was more entertaining than I had hoped. Watching Derek squirm on the stand as he betrayed his so-called soulmate was priceless. His emails, the bank records, and computer logs painted a clear picture of their scheme. He was convinced Rebecca had planned to run and leave him behind. She, in turn, saw him as the ultimate traitor. I watched with satisfaction as their partnership crumbled in real time. Over the 3 days of his testimony, her gaze shifted from heartbreak to sheer contempt. She tried her best on the stand, but there was no digging her way out. The evidence was airtight. The judge handed down the maximum sentence, 20 years in federal prison. No parole, no leniency, just 2 decades of rotting behind bars. As soon as the trial ended, I turned my attention to Derek. He had no idea what was coming. I instructed my lawyer to update the divorce papers, now reflecting Rebecca's conviction and lengthy incarceration. Within days, she was served. Then I moved on to my final masterpiece. Setting up new offshore accounts in Geneva and the Cayman Islands under Derek's name was easy. I subtly left traces on the dark web, making sure the right people found them. Conversations started bubbling up in hacker circles, whispers of an old player resurfacing after 5 years. Now the trick was making it look just convincing enough to implicate Derek, while subtle enough to keep my hands clean. I routed my connection through 10 different servers spread across 6 countries. Then, I set my bot army loose. Within hours, one of the banks Derek had used fell victim to a cyber attack. I watched as the system was compromised, leading straight to 2 specific accounts, both registered under Derek's name. Once access was gained, I moved millions of stolen funds into those accounts. Then I severed the connection and sat back to watch. By morning, another bank had been hit, draining 4 more accounts. $20 million now sat in Derek's name. And now? Now, people were looking for him. Here's your rewritten version, enhancing the narrative flow, intensifying Rebecca's antagonistic role, and making the prose sharper and more immersive. They would never find me, but the digital trail would inevitably lead them to the phantom. The dark web was already buzzing with activity, hacker forums lighting up with speculation, tracking a ghost that had resurfaced after 5 years. The same group that had hunted me before was on the move again. It was time to end this. I returned to the bank system, bypassing Derek's computer entirely, and funneled the last $20 million into a Swiss account. No breadcrumbs, no digital signature. That money was mine now, and I had no worries about the cartel ever reclaiming it. Then, I set the real trap. Derek's computer was still useful. I launched a targeted attack on a different bank account, one that contained a tracker. The money itself didn't matter. It was a small sum, just $2 million, but what it carried was invaluable. I remembered how the cartel's beacon had worked. It wasn't just about stealing the money. It was about knowing how the tracker functioned. Last time, I survived because I saw it coming. I knew about the flagged accounts, the silent alarm embedded in the final transfer. But Derek? Derek had no idea what was coming for him. It would be fascinating to watch him try to explain when they came knocking, demanding answers about millions he never touched. Once the job was done, I wiped my connection to his system, ensuring nothing traced back to me. A week later, I finished clearing out my underground computer room. No more servers, no more traces of my work. I repurposed it as a simple storage area, just another dead space in an old shop. While finalizing paperwork for a property I had purchased in Montana under an anonymous C corporation, a news report flickered across the screen. Derek was missing. He hadn't shown up for work in days. His car was found abandoned in a shopping mall parking lot. He was just gone. I smirked but didn't dwell on it. There were still things to take care of. Then, everything went black. A sharp sting in my neck. A needle. By the time I regained consciousness, I was strapped into a seat on a private jet. That was when the interrogation began. They called me Ghost. They kept asking about the money, $20 million that had disappeared days ago, and another $30 million from 5 years back. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about. They weren't convinced. They had evidence. On my own computer. It made no sense. They wanted one of 2 things. Either I gave them the information and got a quick death, or I kept quiet and they made it slow. I had nothing to tell them. And so, the suffering began. For 3 days, they pushed me to my limits. First, the beatings. Then, the whip. By the 3rd day, it was cattle prods to the most sensitive parts of my body. I wished I had the answers they wanted. I dreaded what would come next. Derek had been missing for over a month. His body was discovered yesterday, mutilated and discarded on a roadside in Colombia. By the end of today, Ethan would be gone, too. But I wasn't Ethan anymore. My belongings had already been shipped to a storage facility in Denver, paid for through an untraceable transfer. I had one last stop before disappearing forever. Rebecca was brought into the room, shackled to the table across from me. She looked rough. Prison life had already worn her down. No makeup, unkempt hair, dark circles under her eyes. Orange wasn't doing her any favors. "How are you holding up?" I asked, almost amused. "Please, Ethan, you have to help me. I'm innocent," she pleaded. I exhaled slowly. "Rebecca, there's nothing I can do for you. Besides, we're getting divorced. Please, Ethan, don't do this." "I didn't do it. I don't want a divorce. Just sign the papers." Tears welled in her eyes. "Talk to Derek. He can help me. You and him were friends once. Please, reach out to him." I tilted my head. "Have you heard from Derek?" "No. I kept hoping he'd visit, but he never showed." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I delivered the final blow. "Well, he'll never come now. He was executed in Colombia." Her face drained of color. No, he couldn't have." "Maybe he didn't know anything," I said. "But the people looking for him thought he did. And now, he's gone." She trembled. "Now, Rebecca," I said, sliding the papers toward her. "Sign the divorce and move on." Tears spilled onto the table. "You're leaving me with nothing." I gave a small shrug. "You won't need anything here. You'll be here for the next 20 years. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. "Ethan, please. I can't stay here. I need to get out." I leaned back, studying her. "Let me tell you a story, Rebecca." I told her about the ghost. A hacker so skilled, he became a myth. A man who infiltrated the worst criminals, took their money, and vanished. The ghost had targeted a cartel, stealing over $30 million. In retaliation, they unleashed other hackers to find him. The ghost saw the trap and disappeared. He erased himself, started over, became someone new. He even fell in love, got married, built a quiet life. But after 3 years, he discovered a betrayal greater than anything he had ever uncovered. His wife had never been faithful. She had kept her real lover all along. Worse, she had only married him to set him up as the fall guy for a massive embezzlement scheme. Rebecca's face twisted in horror as I continued. The ghost wouldn't let that happen. So he turned the tables. He hacked into their devices, gathered evidence, and shifted all the blame onto his wife. He made sure her lover believed she had betrayed him, too. And then, he watched as they destroyed each other. Rebecca inhaled sharply, realization dawning in her eyes. "You," she whispered. You did all of this." I smirked. "Continue?" She swallowed hard. "The ghost knew the cartel was still after him," I continued. "And he had an idea. He made them believe they had finally found their target. He used his wife's lover's computer to steal a large sum from the cartel. He made one small mistake. He left a digital trail back to the boyfriend. The cartel followed it straight to him. They tortured him for over a month before he finally broke. But, of course, he didn't have the answers they wanted." Rebecca's face contorted in fury. "None of this is real," she hissed. Maybe not," I said, standing. "But I thought it might help you process things." Her hands clenched into fists. "You bastard!" she screamed, lunging at me. The guards restrained her, securing her to the chair. As she shrieked, they dragged her away. I picked up the signed divorce papers and walked out. I exited the prison, making my way to a parking lot where a cheap, disposable car waited. But that wasn't my real vehicle. That wasn't my real identity. Ethan was gone. And the ghost? The ghost was free.